You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Hello and welcome to another Word in Your Ear. This time we're going to travel back to the days of the British blues boom. We're going to travel back to the days of musicians wanted ads in the Melody Maker, the days of amusing yourself before gigs by counting the amplifiers, the days of no time wasters, the days when you got changed in the chip shop, to the slightly more luxurious surroundings of playing in the no expense spared circuit of the enormo domes of America with Whitesnake. The book is Where's My Guitar?, which has been described by Joe Bonamassa as a fantastic document of a time and place we won't ever get back again.
He's right.
But we can do something about that right now and welcome the author of this book, Bernie Marsden. Bernie, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm very good. We're fine. We're fine. Where do we find you?
I'm in Buckinghamshire on the Bucks Northampton Oxfordshire border. Really, I live near Buckingham,
which is where you were brought up, wasn't it? Isn't that
yeah.
You were brought up a little bit outside Buckingham, and there's lovely bits about you remember vegetables and milk being delivered by horse-drawn carts. It's fantastic.
It's true.
When were you born? 51. What are your memories of the place?
Just of being in a very small rural town and thinking it doesn't get any bigger than the town hall once I discovered artistes and stuff and dreaming of playing there and then getting a whole tour of the local village halls and stuff like that. But that was going forward a bit. I just grew up as just a normal, junior school, primary school kid in Buckinghamshire, and then along came the Beatles, and I picked up a guitar. So that was the start of it. So that's why I've kind of kept that part of the book so people could relate to being me, maybe in those days as well, in the 50s and 60s. Because to be you say to anybody, even much later, well, what are you going to do when you leave school? I say, well, I'm going to play the guitar. And it was a great source of comedy to people, but to get away with it.
Who were the first guitar heroes then that you remember seeing on the
without a doubt, Hank Marvin, because he was the man, one of the few people you saw on TV with a guitar. And then once I got into playing it for sure, I suppose, I mean, there's only one main influence, and that's Eric Clapton, which is pretty much all of us with that, the Yardbirds Into the Blues Breakers thing. And because of him, we all got to discover the other guys. Then along came the Jeff Becks and Jimi Hendrix, and through them you could discover the blues guys, where they got their influences from. And you're going to try finding a Freddie King album in Buckingham when you're 14.
Possibly difficult.
Yeah,
Let's go back. What was the first guitar you got?
My parents, bless them, they managed to. A cousin of mine had a guitar, and I must have made some kind of decent noise on it, because I must have gone on about it for a few weeks or whatever. And they did source me a guitar, and to this day, I never did really ask them where it came from, but the guitar did arrive and said, "This is for you." And thinking, well, I think it was let him get over it and leave it in the corner, and then we'll never have to put up with this noise again. And then I think I always cut to the chase, really. But I think I played the theme from, I think it was either Coronation Street or Z Cars or something. And I said, I can play this. And when I couldn't, it was pretty cool. But both of them, I can remember their eyes going like, wow. And the moment I saw their eyes widen, I said, can I have an electric guitar, please? And that was the deal with my dad. And, well, look, you've got some pocket money, you do a paper round and all the usual stories. And when we went to I didn't realise at the time that maybe I did, Selma's in London, because I had a family in London, and I went on the 24 bus. And I saw Selma's shop from the bus side. I got off the bus. I was only about 13.
In the Charing Cross Road?
Yeah.
Which is where Eric Clapton and everybody bought their equipment, didn't they?
I didn't know that. And I got in there. And there's this 13-year-old squib from Buckingham, looking at £150 guitars, saying, I quite like, well, can I test this one, please? But they never threw me out. They were always great. And a few guys, much later on, after I turned pro, were still around. And they sort of said, well, you don't remember me? I said, no, but there were a lot of kids like you who are now doing pretty well. And it was really a sweet, innocent time, really.
So there was something about the kind of the shine on the window of a music store, wasn't there?
Yeah.
It was kind of otherworldly, wasn't it?
I had never seen real American guitars in the flesh until that day on the bus. I've seen them on TV. I've seen them in a Melody Maker or in magazine. It probably wasn't even Melody Maker in those days. But you'd seen them on TV, and to think that we used to see a Fender Stratocaster close up and then he'd actually touch it was quite something, you know. And only not that long after, the regional shops started to stop because it wasn't easy even to get stuff in those days because there was a heavy purchase tax on them.
Yeah, there was.
Yeah.
You know, we're really getting back now. I don't think I'm quite that old, but
no, but
it did affect the prices.
Hank Marvin's was the first Stratocaster in this country, wasn't it?
I believe
it was ordered mail order because it's the only way you could get them.
The controversial one, because is it Hank's, is it Bruce's, or is it still?
Oh, is C.
Oh, okay.
Oh, do they still?
This is new.
I've talked to them all over the years about it, and every one of them sort of says, "Yeah, it's definitely Cliff's, but I'm keeping it."
Oh,
I think Bruce has got it, and long may he reign to do so.
Because
I think it was the first one.
Cliff paid for it, didn't he?
Yeah,
that was the deal.
Yeah.
Hank had the catalogue, said get the most expensive thing.
They had a Buddy Holly and the Crickets album, and they said we want one of those, and there's the strap, but they got the wrong one, the wrong colour came. So that was what happened.
And people used to go to their gigs just to stand there and look at it, didn't they? I mean, it was a major thing.
Oh, I would do that. I can remember doing that, just standing at the front of like a 12-inch stage, and there the guy would have left his guitar. No guitar stands in those days. We propped up against them, and I'm just looking at it. And people come and say, "Come on, come and sit down." I say, "No, I'm just looking at this." You know.
Tell us about some of the groups that they're lovely. The James Watt Compassion, Clockwork Mousetrap. Tell us about it.
What was that all about? That was one.
Well, Clockwork Mousetrap is very of the times.
Clockwork Mousetrap. I had nothing to do with
the alarm clock.
I was a 15-year-old guitar player, and they decided to change their name to the Clockwork Mousetrap and paint the van to suit. And I was even then I was quite horrified.
And you were playing, was it Silence is Golden and Bee Gees covers, and then there was some issue where you were instructed to wear a certain stage gear, which was the point where you left the band. What did they want you to wear?
But Silence is Golden was a big record. I mean, nowadays I realise what a great song it is. Yeah. You know, 4 Seasons. I wasn't aware of all that, but it was always on the TV with what were they called? The Tremolos.
The Tremolos, yes.
It seemed to be every band that I was in from 13 to 16 wanted to play it because people wanted it because it was a hit, I suppose. And I just grew to hate it and stuff. And all these other songs that would crop up, there's suddenly someone would play to me something like Rave On by Buddy Holly or something. So, well, why can't we? That's a Buddy Holly song. Why can't we do that? And then they would say, no, it's not a hit. And that would be the reason why you couldn't. I mean, the other songs, I don't know really. Some of them were. I just learned to play them and insisted on playing them. Even if I had my own spot in the bands I was in when I was 15 or 16, I played them pretty badly, but at least I get a chance to play them. So it was good.
So eventually, I mean, your personal interest was the kind of, I suppose, what became the blues boom, you know, that those of us who remember it probably didn't last that long, but it was hugely influential at the time. And you were in, tell us about your group Skinny Cat and their experience of the blues boom.
Skinny Cat was at the end of that period, really. And that was the first local band that I had that I more or less became in control of. I was the kind of center point of it. When I joined the band, there was other people who suddenly left, and I ended up singing instead of the singer. And the horns went, and something else went, and they said, "Well, you can do that." And the rhythm guitarist, he got jettisoned as well. And I thought, well, I can do this probably. And then somebody said, "Well, can you do it?" And I go, "Yeah." It wasn't a matter of taking over; it was just one of those ordinary things. But it was a time when, this glorious time, wasn't it, when you could look at the Melody Maker and say, well, Friday we'll go and see Hendrix, Saturday the Cream, Fleetwood Mac and they say, well, we saw Fleetwood Mac 2 weeks ago, come and see somebody else, and just work out. And that was a drive locally from around here. And the big gig around here for me was the Dunstable, California Ballroom.
Oh, yes.
And I saw Fleetwood Mac there, and then I saw Freddie King there. And it was 40 minutes away, all piling in one of the guys' minis. And I mean, so that was an eye-opener. And I think I saw Chicken Shack there one night with the guys. And I'd auditioned for a couple of people at the time and sort of got the gigs, but the Melody Maker was great and everything, but it never told you who the band was you're auditioning for. It rarely said, the Strawbs seek lead guitarist. It was like lead guitarist needed for name band with work.
Yeah, there you go.
And you go to the audition, and then you think, well, maybe we'd like to offer you the gig. And you say, who's the band? And one of those bands was East of Eden. And I said, I don't really think that's me, really. And Jeff Allen, bless him, to this day, has always said to people, "That was an arrogant little sod he was." He came up for the gig, got the gig, and turned it down.
So you went for it. You actually did an audition with East of Eden. East of Eden, famous for Jim Barbas, the violin player, played the violin on the Who. Won't go full. I can't remember one Who song.
Yeah,
and they had one hit.
Yeah,
and they said, "Thank you, you can join." You said, "No, thank you."
Yeah, it was like
when you discovered who they were. I love that idea.
I think another one was, and they were really great people, was Renaissance.
Oh yes,
and that was, I mean, but I was listening to
kind of medieval folk rock band, were they?
Yeah, it wasn't exactly my thing, and you'd play with these guys. One of the guys in the band was a great piano player called John Hawking, who was in the national team. Yeah. So we're jamming in the afternoon, and I'm playing, doing my Freddie King impression the best I can and stuff, and playing as a bluesy or whatever I can. And then he was into it. He just, you played great, mate. We're going to have some fun. I said, what's the band called? He said, it's Renaissance. Oh.
I get my coat.
I get my coat. Yeah. Why didn't you say earlier? That was not a lot of time.
Subsequently, I realised, what a nice, decent prog rock band that they were, but it really wasn't, for me at the time, it was just like a non-starter. So Skinny Cap were in on the end of that blues thing, and then we could go and see Fleetwood Mac, and then every time you saw somebody and you go, in your dream of dreams, that was your level. Right. And to see Peter in his prime. And I went to see them at Dunstable, and Danny Kerwin, I think it was his second gig or something, and I wanted to hate him so much because he was the same age as me, even a bit younger, I think. And he was in Fleetwood Mac, and I came out of that gig, and he was so good. I just came out thinking, you better up your game a bit if you want to do this. So Skinny Cap became the springboard to go into being a pro, and I joined UFO.
What levels did you go to imitate those kind of people? Because Eric Clapton, a lot of it was about the clothes he wore. I mean, did you go and buy the same stuff?
I bought a pair of Tough Chow shoes after I read that he wore them when I was about 16. Tough Chow shoes, I remember that. I think they were just school shoes, really. But I remember somewhere he'd written, so I thought, one of those things, maybe I can play a bit like him. I've got the same shoes. I mean, he did the same thing after he saw Hendrix, didn't he? Maybe I could play a bit like him. I've got my hair like him.
Well, that was the interesting thing about all those guys, is they all kind of had a gimmick, didn't they?
Yeah.
Well, at Chicken Shack, you'd have the really long.
Oh yeah, the 30-foot lead went out into the audience to play.
Go in the street and play.
Yeah.
Scaring the children. That's right. Yeah. I think it was at Dunstable one night. I think we were watching Chicken Shack, and I think they were maybe even backing Freddie King, and I was raving on about Stan and I thought what a great guitar player he was. And I think it was the bass player or the drummer in my band, Skinny Cat, said, "Well, you're as good as that." And I'm looking at the pro, from the outside of the stage, and it really hit me afterwards that the guy with me who was in my band said, "Well, you could be doing that for real." And it was quite a profound moment, really, when I look back on it afterwards, because I wanted to do it. It was like leaving that band. I mean, Mike Vernon came to see Skinny. And I got a nice letter from him saying that, you're pretty good, kid, but the band ain't going to make it. And I didn't want to show them that letter because there was our band, and you try and stay tight to it at the time. So I kind of knew at some point I was going to have to make the jump myself. And UFO came along, and that was where it all began.
But you also went to see Mike Vernon, didn't you? I think to try and get a publishing deal. Is that right?
Well,
that
was the same time, really.
He was
one of the few, to credit to this day, who from London, in the real settings of what I was working in, he did actually come up. I think it was to a gig in Northamptonshire to see the band live. He thought we were good enough to, the tape was good enough to come and see us live. And afterwards, he just said, "I think you've got loads of promise and potential, but I think the band are a little bit behind you," kind of thing. So I never got anything. Maybe I should have took that. I might have been Danny Kerwin at the time. I don't know. But it was going into that situation. I went to Apple as well in Savile Row with the same tapes, really, and they were really sweet. They were just. When I look back now, you think about it, it was a fantastic time, and it was crazy in there. It was crazy in there. When I look back now, I think just the fact that I went there is.
So you just turned up at Apple, with the tape. Did you see anybody you recognised, Derek Taylor or George Harris?
Well, I saw James Taylor because
James Taylor, of course, he was. That's right,
he was
signed
very hard to miss. The ball guy, but I knew him from his earlier music only because of his appearance, really. And we had a very, very brief word. And he said, "I'm in a band. I've got my quarter-inch tape." And he said, "Oh, these guys are really good." Because he'd been signed by them, and I was
the only person, wasn't he?
I think so, yeah. And the guy did take my tape, and one of the very few times that it happened, they made a cassette copy or something of my tape, and said, "You'll hear from us," And I don't think I ever did, but I never experienced anybody taking the tape away, except for when I went to DJM, and the very person who took my tape away that day was none other than Elton John. And you couldn't make that up, could you?
No. Was there any response from him? Did you ever hear what he thought of it?
No. I mean, but it was a fantastic bloke. And I've never seen him from that day to this. But he took me out. He felt sorry for me, I think, because I sat waiting to see. I thought Dick James, but it turned out to be Stephen James.
Oh, right, yeah. And
I think I had an 11 o'clock appointment. You can imagine I got up from Buckingham in the morning. And all excited, but I knew about Elton John because Lady Samantha was pretty much hot on the radio at the time, and he looked a character at the time. He came in, he had denim stuff, he had patches all over him and stuff like that. But he walked because he worked, I think, in those offices. Well, I know he did. And he walked on. He said, "You've been here for ages. Who are you?" I said, "I'm here to see Mr. James." And he went, "Mr. James, he's not here." And I said, "Oh," and I must have seen my face go like, "Oh," And he said, I'm just going off my coffee break. He said, "Do you want a cup of coffee?" And the first real cup of coffee I think I ever had in my life was with him at the Gioconda in.
That's fun. So it wasn't not instant coffee; it was proper coffee.
Was that? Yeah. And he paid for it as well. And I said, I've got. No, I said, we'll put that down to making Stephen James make you wait. And it was great. It was fantastic. I never had a chance to thank him ever since, except I do in the book. But it was really, But it was to me, it was already. I heard Lady Samantha, and I thought it was a great song. I thought this is great. But there he was, right in front of me, saying, "What are you doing? You've been here for an hour." That was it. Strange times, but it was a thing I wouldn't change because Skinny Cat gave me that impetus to go into those places and try one more time to get that deal, which never happened.
But then you joined UFO, as you were saying a minute ago, and it fell out. I mean, it fell out really badly with Phil Mogg. Yeah, and there's a bit where you actually end up thumping him on stage.
Some days we didn't fight. Yeah.
So what was it about him that made him so difficult to cohabit with?
It was looking back on it. I think I do say at the end of in the book. No matter what, because I have a go all the way moaning and groaning about UFO, but I do say, but without UFO, I wouldn't have had that break, and I wouldn't be writing this book, which is very true. And Phil and I was just a balance of minds, really. And I think before me, he had been totally in control and doing exactly what he wanted to do within the setup. I started asking questions, So, well, hang on, we're working 5 nights a week. And what does the band get a night? 150 quid? And why do I get £15 a week? I don't ask questions like that. I said, well, I am going to ask questions like that. And then we said, well, we'll get more money when we go to Germany. So shut your face. And they would call me country boy because I was from down here. and they were all London. But they weren't even real Londoners either. You know, they were all from like Tottenham and.
That's real London.
Steady on with Tottenham. Thin ice there.
I apologise for all North Londoners, but you know what I mean. They weren't Cockneys.
No, okay.
Yeah. But you see, I did it for all the wrong reasons. That they were signed to Chrysalis. They had agency, management, and a record deal, apparently. And they were going to Japan very quickly. And I thought, everything's, and all the guys in Skinny Cat said, you got to do this one, you got to do.
Yeah.
So I did, and I knew musically it was a bad move. I thought, having in turn already said no to these other bands, I could go into this pre-heavy metal band. And I'm trying to play like cool BB King stuff.
Yeah.
It didn't work really. And I think I say I went from being quite a big name in North Bucks to being fairly well known in Northern Europe.
Right.
And that changed. That did change everything. I mean, but then I'd start getting a bit of a following because lead guitarists do, and my name started. The second German tour, they started putting UFO featuring me.
Oh, that doesn't go down well.
Oh man, I had this terrible row going on in the promoter's office, thinking, "What's going on here?" And it was Phil and the promoter moaning. He was moaning at the promoter for putting my name on the poster, and I couldn't understand it because my naivety of coming from the countryside, because I was very green still to the business.
Yeah.
And so hang on, we're in the same group. It was like being in a soccer team. And don't pass him the ball; he might score, kind of thing. And he said, no. He said, we don't have any of that. We're a group. And it went downhill pretty much after that. And now he hit me in the face at the London School of Economics one night. I thought somebody had thrown. I'd broken a string, and we hadn't been getting on that well. And Supertramp, we're on the bill with Supertramp. Roger Hodgson. I mean, you couldn't have more chalk and cheese. Honestly, Supertramp in the afternoon were apologising to each other if the bass or the guitar was a little bit loud in their monitors.
Yeah.
Whereas if I'd have said that to Mogg, he would have demanded another 1,000 watts to be in my monitor of him singing. That was the difference. Yeah. So during the gig, the sound was going. I broke a string, and I didn't have tech in those days. And I changed the guitar within about 20 seconds. Unplugged it, put the spare on, and I felt this thing hit me on the side. I thought somebody had thrown something from the stage, and it really hurt a little bit after a while. It started to well up a bit, and I looked across at the late Pete Way, bless him, and we're still playing in the middle of some boogie in G or A or something, just on and on and on. And I'm looking at him mouthing down, "You just hit me." And Pete Way is crying with laughter, doing this. So I took this little Les Paul Junior, which was a very sturdy little guitar, and while Phil was at the microphone, I slammed it across the shoulders with it like this. And he went down the microphone, still singing professionally. But we never did have a real bad fallout after that again. But I didn't stay with the band that long after that either. But, I saw Michael Schenker first time around, and he was amazing. And I was the one who said, "This is the guy you should have in the band." And then Phil Mogg said, "We don't look at support groups." But we've seen each other many times since, so we're fine now.
So I think the next band was Wild Turkey, Glenn Cornick's Wild Turkey. I was a former member of Jethro Tull, and I was intrigued by your account of touring with Wild Turkey, which you used to get around in a Chevrolet. Is that right?
Indeed, yeah. 3 seats in the front, 3 seats in the back. Plenty of room for illicit bourbon. Yeah.
But still stayed in the most kind of low rent kind of bed and breakfast, didn't you? Kind of most knackered.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. and Mrs. Smith's bed and breakfast and stuff like that. And sometimes we'd pull up outside of our supposed night stop and go and look at each other and go, "Nah." We just keep going and go straight to Glasgow or something or whatever. We drove to Madrid overnight from London. We just started in London and got to 3 PM, and Glenn never stopped. But Glenn is the man who turned me on to Frank Zappa. And that was a turning point in my life as well. Glenn was a lovely guy. He was very great bass player and very knowledgeable. He also was probably responsible for starting me off on the guitar collecting as well. But it was a wild time. But Turkey, we were in Spain when Franco was very much in charge. And of course, you can imagine 1974, hair down. Well, sorry about that. I had my haircut for this, by the way.
We noticed. Yeah, very touched.
Lockdown. And we were all running around. They had the secret. Well, they weren't very secret police. They had people following us around everywhere. Because I think
T-shirt saying secret police.
Yeah. We stopped on the way back from Zaragoza one day. It was about 110 degrees. Stopped for a beer at a hacienda place or whatever, and we took the beer outside, and that gave them a chance to arrest us because we took beer onto the street. And the next thing is, one of them was a Jethro Tull fan, and we ended up, instead of being arrested, we ended up with a police escort into the next town. You couldn't, unbelievable stuff. The guy was humming Living in the Past and going, Jethro Tull.
Moving on, I just want to ask you about somebody you knew and worked with a bit later on, but as a session man, which is Mickie Most.
Yeah.
And you say you kind of learnt more from Mickie Most than most people. Is that fair to say?
I think I learned more about making records from Mickie Most than anybody, because to watch him at work, a guy wasn't very talented musically. He had the instruments and he had the know-how, but in the studio, to make a record that was going to be played on the radio, I've never come across anybody like him since. Really, I wasn't in and out of the studio with all the great producers of our time, but I would say he must have been one of the best.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And he was a guy who a bit of a Marmite guy, I think. Talk to Jeff Beck about him, and you probably get a whole different story. But he was always very pleasant to me, and he hired me for a lot of sessions.
Yeah, you played on "You Sexy Thing" by Hot Chocolate, didn't you?
I believe so. Yeah, because we did backing tracks, and he would say, "Bernard, I'll come and pick you up from your flat in London, in Devonshire Terrace. I used to live." And he had a Rolls Royce, and in those days he had a phone in his car.
Oh yes,
it was so impressive, man. And for him to come and get me, this was just Mickie, Go on, Bernard, I'll come pick you up 4 o'clock, because he had a mobile studio pretty much parked up in the front part of his garden at the house. So that's where I would go with him. But sitting in his car, watching him pick up a phone to talk to his wife, I'm on the way home, was amazing,
It was.
And then he would say, well, we'll go in the studio, and there was a load of backing tracks, and I didn't know whether it was, he had so many acts signed to rack, but I was pretty good with, and I've been listening to a lot of stuff with, Motown stuff, and I liked the rhythm, and I was pretty good with the wire stuff, and he got me on all that stuff. And then only afterwards, years later, I think it was dear Patrick Olive from Hot Chocolate said to me, "You said, well, you played on most of the records, you know."
You didn't know.
I didn't know. No, I think I definitely played on Heaven's on the Back Street of a Cadillac or something like that.
Right.
And Emma, I think. And I know that I didn't do the famous guitar part of the sexy thing. I think I was the rhythm guitar part under it. I would remember doing that. Right. That was almost certainly the guy from Hot Chocolate. But I played on other songs that I still don't really know what they were. Probably Racy and did I do some Susie Quattro? I don't know. may have done. I think she had different producers, but you never knew her, Mickie, because he would just say, "I think this one's in A, this one's in G, and this one's whatever," and there were no top lines, very rarely.
Right.
He was a great bloke to be around. He was funny, man, because he'd come from that 50s era as well, and he'd toured with those package tours in the 60s. And and I just gravitated towards sitting with him on the bus and stuff, or in his car, and chatting about him. He was. I wish in these days you could put the phone on and record everything, but he was. I really, really liked him, and I
like the idea that he had a butler, didn't he?
Oh, that was the day one of the days he phoned his wife and he said, "I've got Bernie for dinner." And he took me, and it must have, obviously the lines must have been so bad. And the only Bernie she knew wasn't me. But when I got there, a butler opened the door and said, "Good evening, sir." And Mickie was looking, going, "What?" He said, "You better go in the studio." So I went into the mobile and then back into the house. And the table was all laid out with lovely candelabra and stuff. And his wife came down, who was a delight, and lovely, lovely, lovely lady. And he said, "Oh, this is my wife, Mrs. Bernie." And her face went, "Can I word, Mick?"
She's obviously crestfallen, was she?
Well, yeah, I hated to disappoint her, and I love her to this day. But the only Bernie she knew was Sir Bernard Delphont.
So she dressed up and
she dressed up and everything.
Got the tomfoolery on. Yeah.
Looked amazing. And the butler was like, "Good evening, sir." And it got so bad, I was kind of embarrassed, and they were laughing their heads off. To the eternal credit, they were so funny. She particularly, she never took the tiara off, and it was really, really fun. She said that there was a plate glass door in this dining room, and they told me about 10 times, "Be careful," but I'd had too much to drink, and I went smack into the plate and ended up with a shiner up here. And she said, "You have to stay the night because you can't drive home or whatever with that." And she looked after me like a nurse, and I loved her from that day to this. And it was one of those. And now I was told that he dined out on that story quite a bit as well.
But Mickie Most is a classic example of if you've got it, flaunt it, wasn't it? It's kind of butler, massive house, Rolls Royce with a phone in it,
Amazing. I couldn't. I mean, I got my Levi's on, Levi jacket, hair down, and this is Bernie, and her face was just like, "Can I have a word?" It was like,
that's lovely.
It's a sitcom.
It is.
Yeah.
Tell it that. I suppose the transitional moment in your career is when you joined Pace Ashton Lord. Is that fair to say that you kind of move up to the first division there, really?
The first division really was playing with Cozy Powell after Wild Turkey.
Right.
Cozy was such a great player. As musician-wise, it was such a step, 2 steps up instead of 1 or 3 or whatever. And he was a big influence on me, especially with Mickey's situation, because it was his hit record that introduced me to Mickie. But his attitude to the business also had a lot of effect on me as well. It was like very much a, "Come on, let's get on with it. All right, yeah, we're in the studio, so okay, that's Carl Palmer over there. Who cares?" He was one of those kind of guys. He liked Carl Palmer, but everybody was the same to Cozy, and he instilled in me that kind of get on with it business in the studio rather than being too precious about spending months and months to get the drum track right. He was very much getting there at 12 o'clock and let's be out there by 2.
Right.
And he was a guy who was very influential on calling around and making sure that you did the right job. So he would then say to me, "I've got this gig for you." And it was Pace Ashton Lord. And I was more terrified of not getting the gig and having to tell him than not getting the gig. But as it happened, I did get the gig, so that was all right. And that was another step, because working with John and Ian was just another 2 rungs at a time. Tony was a different thing.
I was going to say, tell us about Tony. You did a certain amount of driving Tony from the pub to the gig, didn't you?
Yeah, only every day. Yeah, I was the one tasked with getting them to the rehearsals, and I would go to the Richard Steele's, which I think is still up on Haverstock Hill, and getting them out of there every day was a game, just a game. And all his mates, his drinking partners, and there were writers. TV producers, actors, and everybody was against me. And the names they used to call me when I used to arrive with the car to go in and get him. I mean, you wouldn't believe. They were disgraceful, really. "Oh, you really are a really nasty little twit, aren't you?" And Ronald Fraser was the actor Ronald Fraser. I mean, I hated that man for no other reason that he was horrible to me. And I'd take him down there and drive down, thinking I'm going to get such a rollicking now from John because we're 2 hours late. And they say, "No," he said, "that every day, the fact that you get him here is a miracle." Tony was just an absolute mission on his own. It was, and why I was in Pace Ashton Lord was only because he was John's mate, really. I mean, you think about it, you've got John Lord playing keyboard. You don't really need another keyboard player.
No, that's true.
He hates guitarists. I'd play something and look at me and go, "Oh, noise," And I said, what am I supposed to do, you know? And you got to say, take no notice on him, dear boy, take no notice on him. You know, Casey just laughed in the corner. So Casey Ashton Law went into, third gear and ended up in fifth gear, totally out of control with nothing to do. And we did 5 shows in Great Britain, 5. And we went back to Munich to do a second album, and it was all over. But in that interim period, I'd met David Coverdale.
Right.
We were recording the movie, so that's the big connection.
So tell us about that. There are bits that are just comic, really, aren't there? There's the Lovehunter, the controversy over the Lovehunter sleeve with the snake and the naked girl, or there's a bit where you go to Graceland and things. I started to think, well, when you watched Spinal Tap, how did you feel? Did you think you'd live this movie?
Nobody laughed. So, well, that's true, isn't it? Yeah, that's Black Sabbath. Yeah. That actually happened. We did that. No, Spinal Tap. To most, I think you'll talk to anybody from my generation of players in rock band, and nobody found that film very funny at all. I mean, it's a great film now, and I do say it's hysterical, but you know, they nailed it so well that people did think it was real, and I suppose in a way it was real, you know.
But when you saw the sleeve of Lovehunter, famously
what did you think?
as a naked woman astride the large snake, did you think, that could be a problem?
What's wrong with being sexy?
What year is it? Who am I? Do you know, the honest truth to that, and honestly, when they say the first Wednesday, I'll tell you honestly, and that means it's the first line. But only David really ever saw that sleeve.
Right.
None of us even saw. I never saw the cover to Trouble, Lovehunter. I never knew that until 2 years afterwards that the picture of me on Ready and Willing is the same as the one of me on Trouble. That's how much interest the rest of us really took in the artwork. It was not David's thing really, and he was the one dealing with all the lyrics, and he was the one dealing with journalists, especially female journalists, who took some offence, well, and in some cases rightly. And then say, well, you're the one who recorded Lie Down, I Think I Love You. And I said, well, yeah, but it was very much, with David's stuff, it was all very tongue-in-cheek. And it was done as a bit of fun. It wasn't meant, I think, to, put anybody down or look for a reason to be controversial. We weren't that clever enough, I don't think. It looked like they've done it again, and then we fell into the trap because Come and Get It came out. And then there was a controversy with that, and then the Americans changed the artwork, and they've done it again. It was again. None of us really. In fact, I've been in touch with somebody only recently who did the artwork for Come and Get It, and that original has gone missing. So, but we never had a great deal to do with the cover. So, in answer to your question, really, Lovehunter, I was more interested in what was inside the cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You co-wrote one song. Well, you probably co-wrote more than one song, but there's one particular song from that era that has kind of outlasted that era. Tell us about that and how important that's been to you and to your career.
You mean Here I Go Again?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Here I Go Again. I wrote for the last, what turned out to be my last Whitesnake album. Ironically, it turned out to be the last track we recorded as well, funnily enough. It was put together at my old house, which isn't 5 minutes from where we're sitting now. But I put a demo together on my old Revox, and I had a cassette of it, and I knew that there was something good about it, and I wanted to play it today. We got to Clairwell Castle, and I sort of kept thinking, well, should we work on this and I'll get this together a bit better? And so I worked on it a bit more. And only towards the end of the first sessions down there, I took it one Saturday afternoon, it was, and I played it to him, and I sang it through the chorus, and I sang through this piece to the point where it goes from a kind of a minor to a major thing, so it goes into the positive kind of side of it. And he just really liked it, and he said, oh, I'm going to rewrite some of this, and because I had an idea for the chorus, an idea for I think the second verse was the original first part, and stuff like that. But that was the deal we had, him and I. If we were in a room together, that we were song together. And he disappeared up into his room at Clearwell Castle. And only, I think that was about 5 o'clock, came back down all motivated and said, what do you think of this? He more or less had it finished. I think we recorded it a couple of days later. But it was only me, John, Ian and David, and there's only 4 of us on the track. And John Lord heard the intro I played on little figure on the guitar, and he looked at me and said, play that again? I said, what, this? And I played it to him, and he said, you're a clever little sod, aren't you? He said, that's a hook. He said, that's a real hook, and I'm going to play that on the Hammond organ. So I gave in immediately because it was the great John Lord. He didn't argue with John. He never wanted to. He was such a huge mentor to me. And we recorded it, and it was a hit over here. And it did okay. And then the band broke up, and 5 years later, or whatever, it's re-recorded with the new all-American Whitesnake, and goes to number 1. And the rest is writing books.
It always fascinates me, Bernie, because I've tried this with numerous musicians. You can have long careers, you do loads of things, loads of different things. In the end, it's one song. Is that true in your case?
Yeah. I mean, if you break it down, even not just even monetary wise, if you break it down into what people talk about or what they know you for, you say, well, I'm a guitar player and I was in this band, but he's the guy who wrote Here I Go Again, you know, or he's the guy who wrote Here I Go Again and with David Coverdale, because, you know, we're equal on it and whatever. And that's such I'm proud to be involved in. And you always want, as a writer, you want to be as successful as possible as a writer. And the thought of being number 1 in America is the dream of pretty much every musician you'll ever talk to from this side of the Atlantic. And there it is, you know, we're up there and we're number 1. We being me and him as the writers. And there's a lot of people, a great deal many people in America who don't know I was ever in Whitesnake. But there's also a great many people who do. And as such, I've managed to be out of Whitesnake for twice as long as I was ever in it. And here we are talking about it because it's still relative in my career, because I don't have to play. I enjoy playing it. I played, you know, whether it's still a 3,000 festival or a 10,000 festival, or I go into one of the book clubs, you know, with 150 people. You know, if you don't play it, they're going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
And you get to play it the way it was made as well.
I'm not asking you to tell me how much money you made out of it, but does it still pay now, many years later, even in the era of streaming and so forth?
Not so much from the streaming. That's got to be sorted from a writer's point of view. But Here I Go has been one of the great synchronization songs for movies and campaigns. And I have to, you know, it's been very good to me and given me everything I've been able to do post being in the band, because most of my contemporaries, you know, a lot of guys much superior musicians or guitar players to me or whatever, but who didn't write anything during their tenure, you know, as 25 to 35-year-olds in a band, who are, you know, with this pandemic, for instance, the last year and a half, 2 years, you know, I really do feel for them, because they're still gigging out there 5 days a week and relying on their gigs. Those gigs are disappearing. I don't have to really go out and do anything. I still enjoy doing the gigs when I play them, but, you know, the royalties and the success of Whitesnake post my being part of it also is obviously added, because the sales of that record anyway went through the roof to start with in America when it was number 1. And it was number 1, I think, in 3 different versions all over the world. And it's, you know, Steve Lukather is funny. He calls it mailbox money. You know, as we're speaking today, it's been on the radio in America probably got 500 times.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mailbox money. That's a good one.
Yeah, that is.
I've never heard that one. Oh, that must be. That
Where are you putting your mailbox money? You know. So.
But you must also think just how lucky that you played it to David Coverdale, and presumably he was in a certain mood to be receptive, and then you played it to John Lord, and John Lord going, That's a hook.
Yeah.
And it's all the little human reactions, isn't it, that
We've
turns
done
into
it.
something.
We had a similar thing on every album. There's a spark. We did it on Lovehunter with a song called "Walking in the Shadow of the Blues." That one stood the test of time really well. "Fool for Your Lovin'" was the first Whitesnake hit. "Fool for Your Lovin'" was the BBC's. We play rock music. No, you don't. We play Whitesnake, and we got away with that for a while.
Right.
And that was a big hit. "Fool for Your Lovin' was that was the breakthrough one really. "Ready and Willing" was the breakthrough album. But people remember Donington Park and or Reading with 35,000 people. But also there were 200 people at Lincoln Tech when we began. When we were called Dinosaurs, and I was 26 years old. Right. The whole punk thing was going on, and how dare these old guys start new bands? I was 20. I think I was 26.
Yes.
Was that even remotely a threat? That you always thought, if you read the music press at the time, there was the rise of ska, there was disco, there was punk rock. There can't be a market for these old people playing kind of classic rock. No. I can't imagine you were even remotely bothered by that.
Never gave it a moment's thought. No. A punk to me was. We were recording the Pace Ashton Lord album in Munich at the famous Land Studios. And just being there was a trip for me, It's like this guy from the villages, And they talk about this punk music. And now and again, after being there for 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, somebody come over or somebody would fly you over the Melody Maker or whatever. And we'd be reading your articles a lot, And we read about this and punk that. We say, well, punk is the guys in the Clint Eastwood movies. Well, make my day, punk. And so on. Because we were sort of out there, away from it in a bubble, really. And because it was quite quick, that went through like the summer of '76, was it?
77 more. Yeah,
77. Yeah, 77. And it was suddenly the punk. I remember saying to John, I think, what's all this punk business? And he said, I have no idea, dear boy. I don't really care.
I love
your
impersonations of John. And also David. David's got a slightly posh accent, basically, isn't
he? He seems to have a very, very, I think there's still a lot of the northern boy in him, though.
You're making them both sound a bit like Keith Richards.
No, there was an era where there was Viv Stanchel, all that stuff, wasn't it? Yeah. There was an era where rock heroes talked like that.
My dear boy.
They were like theatricals, weren't they? Like Donald Wolfitz or something like that. Bernie, that and millions of other tales are in Bernie Marsden's book, Where's My Guitar, which we heartily recommend.
It's really
to anybody who's enjoyed what we've been talking about. And when this bloody war is over, Bernie, you'll be out talking about it in bookshops and so forth, and play the music once again.
And then we'll talk about the next one. Now that I'm a signed HarperCollins writer, as you know.
Volume 2.
Yes, there you go.
Good.
I got to do something.
Yeah. Look, it's been lovely talking to you.
Great.
Thanks very much for your time.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.